How's it going, everyone? Austin Honecker here. I just want to come on here for a while and give them a review for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Rampage from 2 nights ago, which was September 10th, 2021. I gotta say, it was awesome from start to finish. For the matches, match 1, it was Andrade El Idolo versus Pac. That was a great match. But the ending to it, Andrade El Idolo went over due to interference from Chavo Guerrero Jr. Well, what happened with that, Jose, which is Andrade El Idolo's personal assistant, distracted the referee with a taser, and as Jose was distracting the referee, the Lucha Brothers, which are Rey Fenix and Penta El Cerro Miedo, attacked Jose and laid him out with a double super kick. And while the referee was distracted and Pac had Andrade El Idolo in the brutalizer, Chavo Guerrero Jr. came in the ring and attacked Pac with the iPad, and Chavo Guerrero Jr. got out of the ring, and and Andrade El Idolo pinned Pac 1, 2, 3. It was over. Well, after the match, after the match, the Lucha Brothers, which are Rey Fenix and Penta El Cerro Miedo, came in the ring to tend to Pac. But Chavo Guerrero Jr. But Andrade El Idolo, Chavo Guerrero Jr., and Jose were celebrating. Well, Jose told Andrade El Idolo about Chavo Guerrero Jr. interfering and helping him win. Well, Andrade El Idolo got pissed off at Chavo Guerrero Jr., and Andrade El Idolo attacked Chavo Guerrero Jr. with a forearm strike, and Andrade El Idolo and Jose left. Chavo Guerrero Jr. got back up and was wondering why Andrade El Idolo and Jose were leaving him. So, as Andrade El Idolo and Jose left, Chavo Guerrero Jr. turned around and the Lucha Brothers attacked Chavo Guerrero Jr. with a double super kick, and the Lucha Brothers grabbed Chavo Guerrero Jr. and threw him into the ring, and as Chavo Guerrero Jr. was in the ring, the Lucha Brothers came in the ring, and Pac executed the brutalizer to Chavo Guerrero Jr., and as Pac had the brutalizer on Chavo Guerrero Jr. locked in, the referees tried to break it up, but to no avail. Bryce Brimsberg was trying to break it up, but all the other referees, which are Mike Posey, Rick Knox, Paul Turner, and Aubrey Edwards, tried to break it up, but the Lucha Brothers were guarding the referees from trying to break it up, but Pac eventually let Chavo Guerrero Jr. go, and the Death Triangle, which are Pac, Rey Fenix, and Penta El Cerro Miedo, celebrated and everything. That was cool. That was match 1, by the way. Match 2, it was Ruby Soho, Riho, and Chris Statlander versus Rebel, Britt Baker, and Jamie Hayter. Wait a minute. Match 2, it was Ruby Soho, Riho, and Chris Statlander versus Britt Baker, Rebel, and Jamie Hayter. That was a great match, but the ending to it, Ruby Soho, Riho, and Chris Statlander went over because Ruby Soho pinned Rebel with the Pele kick. And match 3, which was the main event, it was Brian Pillman Jr. versus Max Caster. That was a great match, but the ending to it, Brian Pillman Jr. went over with the springboard clothesline. Well, before the match, the Acclaimed, which are Max Caster and Anthony Bowens, came out. Max Caster done a rap on Brian Pillman Jr. and the city of Cincinnati, Ohio. And then Anthony Bowens done his signature line, AEW, the Acclaimed have Cincinnati, the Acclaimed have arrived. Then Brian Pillman Jr. came out, and Brian Pillman Jr. came out to the ring and attacked Max Caster and beat the shit out of him. And which that was cool. And that was before the match. And after the match, as Brian Pillman Jr. was celebrating his victory, Anthony Bowens came into the ring and attacked Brian Pillman Jr. and beat the shit out of him. And then Max Caster joined in on the attack with Anthony Bowens, beating the shit out of Brian Pillman Jr. And as Max Caster was holding Brian Pillman Jr. down, Anthony Bowens was getting ready to attack Anthony Bowens was getting ready to attack Brian Pillman Jr. with the boombox. But Jon Moxley came out, and Jon Moxley kicked Anthony Bowens in the stomach, and then Jon Moxley took the boombox and attacked Anthony Bowens with it. And then Brian Pillman Jr. attacked Max Caster with a super kick, and then Jon Moxley attacked Max Caster with the paradigm shift. And after the Acclaimed were laid out, Jon Moxley and Brian Pillman Jr. celebrated and everything. That was cool. Now, besides the matches, Tony Schiavone interviewed Sting and Darby Allin, and what happened was, well, like I said, besides the matches, Tony Schiavone interviewed Sting and Darby Allin, and Tony Schiavone was pretty much informing Sting and Darby Allin about Tully Blanchard's comments about him on Dynamite and everything. And then Darby Allin said, "Tully Blanchard, you say that Sting's riding my coattails. Bullshit. And Sean Spears, you generic piece of shit, if it wasn't for Tully Blanchard, you would be nothing." And then Sting got on the microphone and was saying, "Tully Blanchard, you say I'm riding Darby Allin's coattails? Well, newsflash, Tully. All throughout your career, you rode the coattails of Ric Flair, and you rode the coattails of Arn Anderson. And you say you want to fight me in this very ring? Well, how about we do it right here, right now, in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio?" Then Tully Blanchard came out and was talking shit, saying, "So Sting," well, Tully Blanchard came out with a microphone and said, "So Sting, you want to sit there and say that I've rode people's coattails throughout my career, bringing up my past and everything? Well, guess what, Sting?" Well, Tully Blanchard came out, and Tully Blanchard was saying, "So Sting, you said that I've been riding everyone's coattails throughout my career. Yeah, bring up my past and everything." Like, Tully Blanchard just kept talking shit. And as Sting and Darby Allin were distracted by Tully Blanchard, Sean Spears grabbed Darby Allin by his feet and pulled him out of the ring, and Sean Spears attacked Darby Allin with the C4 outside of the ring while Sting was still distracted. And Tully Blanchard was saying, "Great job, Sean. We done what we accomplished what we had planned," and everything. And then Sting just now noticed that Darby Allin was laid out and Sean Spears laid him out. Well, Sting turned around and got out of the ring and was getting ready to attack Sean Spears, but Sean Spears retreated through the crowd and everything. That was cool. Adam Cole cut a promo and was saying that AEW, the reason he came to AEW is because it's the best professional wrestling company ever, and he joined the Elite because not only are the Elite a great team, but they're a brotherhood. I trust Kenny Omega with my life, and I trust the Young Bucks with my life. Now, Christian Cage and Bryan Danielson, they're great talents. But I got news for them. I may not be in my prime yet, but I know for a fact they're not going to be able to keep up with me. And that's a fact. And I, for one, do not mind squaring up with Bryan Danielson. Then Bryan Danielson cut a promo and was talking about how the Elite don't act serious, and and he was tired of their silly shenanigans and everything. And Bryan Danielson was also talking about how he wasn't after the whole Elite. He was only after one man, and that's Kenny Omega. And Bryan Danielson was also talking about how he came to AEW because he wanted to wrestle and kick people's fucking heads in. And Bryan Danielson was saying, if Kenny Omega don't step up, then I'll take on anybody, because that's why what I love about AEW, everyone is hungry. So if Kenny Omega don't step up, I'll take on anybody and everything. That was cool. And Mark Henry interviewed Max Caster along with Anthony Bowens and Brian Pillman Jr. Well, Mark Henry asked Max Caster, he said, Max Caster, you've been antagonizing Brian Pillman Jr. for months. What's up with that? Why are you doing it? And Max Caster was saying, Mark, unlike Brian Pillman Jr., he has fake friends like Griff Garrison and Julia Hart who won't be out there in his corner, but I have a friend, a real best friend, in Anthony Bowens. And tonight, I'm going to kick Brian Pillman Jr.'s ass and everything. And Anthony Bowens was talking about how Max Caster was going to destroy Brian Pillman Jr. and everything, and said, now that is a mic drop. Then Mark Henry asked Brian Pillman Jr., he said, Brian Pillman Jr., what's your strategy? Brian Pillman Jr. was saying, well, Mark, Max Caster can talk the talk, but let's see if he can walk the walk. Because tonight, in my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, I'm going to kick Max Caster's ass. Because I am Brian Pillman Jr., and I will go 100 miles per hour and everything. And Mark Henry was saying, well, the time for talk is over. Let's take it to the ring and everything. That was cool. Now, besides all that, Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, and Taz done guest commentary. But besides all that, Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, and Taz done commentary throughout the whole show. They done awesome as usual. And Mark Henry done commentary along with Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, and Taz during the matches of Andrade El Idolo versus Pac, and Ruby Soho, Riho, and Chris Statlander versus Britt Baker, Rebel, and Jamie Hayter. Mark Henry done great on commentary. Done awesome. Mark Henry done awesome on commentary. And the referees for the event were Paul Turner, Bryce Remsburg, and Aubrey Edwards. Bryce Remsburg refereed the match between Andrade El Idolo versus Pac. Paul Turner refereed the match between Ruby Soho, Riho, and Chris Statlander versus Rebel, Britt Baker, and Jamie Hayter. And, wait a minute. The referees for the event were Paul Turner, Bryce Remsburg, and Aubrey Edwards. Bryce Remsburg refereed the match between Andrade El Idolo versus Pac. Paul Turner refereed the match between Ruby Soho, Riho, and Chris Statlander versus Britt Baker, Rebel, and Jamie Hayter. That's Paul Turner, by the way. And Aubrey Edwards refereed the match between Brian Pillman Jr. versus Max Caster. All the referees done awesome as usual. But anyway, I just want to come on here for a while and give them a review for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Rampage from September 10th, 2021, which was 2 nights ago. Like I said, it was awesome from start to finish. And with that being said, my name is Austin Honecker, and I will catch your ass down the road. Peace out. Peace out.